If a fire starts in your living room tonight, you probably think you have about 15 minutes to grab your kids, find your pets, and get out. That is what we've all been taught. But if your house was built in the last 20 years, you actually have less than 3. We are sold the lie that modern technology and new building codes make us safer. The terrifying truth? Your living room is currently furnished with the chemical equivalent of solid gasoline. Meanwhile, a highly effective secret that made medieval homes practically unburnable was quietly made illegal. Here is exactly why your modern home is a trap, and the forgotten ancient science that could have saved it. A modern house disappears in a matter of minutes. You must first understand the physics of a modern fire. Fire behavior in residential spaces centers on a terrifying phenomenon known as flashover. Flashover is the precise moment when a localized fire, say a burning sofa, produces enough radiant heat to simultaneously ignite every single combustible surface in a room. In a legacy room filled with mid-20th century furniture and solid wood, a fire burns locally. It slowly consumes the immediate area, generating heat that banks against the ceiling and creeps downward. Testing shows that a traditional room takes nearly 30 minutes to reach the 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit required to trigger flashover. But in a modern environment, the timeline is drastically compressed. When researchers ignite a replica of a contemporary living room, the fire does not merely burn, it accelerates aggressively. The flames produce a thick, toxic black smoke that descends rapidly from the ceiling. Within 3 to 4 minutes, the ambient thermal radiation becomes so intense that everything, the carpet, the curtains, the paint on the walls, and the distant armchair, bursts into flames at the exact same second. The room transforms from a space with a fire inside it to a space that is entirely on fire. Surviving inside the structure past this 3-minute mark becomes biologically impossible. The modern home has fundamentally altered the chemistry of residential combustion. The primary culprit behind this deadly acceleration sits right in the middle of your living room. The historical shift in interior furnishings represents one of the most drastic changes in domestic fire safety. Until the mid-20th century, household furniture was stuffed with natural materials like cotton, wool, horsehair, and metal springs. These materials burn, but they burn sluggishly, requiring a constant source of extreme heat to sustain combustion. Today, almost every soft surface in a modern home is manufactured from polyurethane foam and wrapped in synthetic, hydrocarbon-based fabrics like polyester and nylon. Polyurethane foam is a marvel of manufacturing efficiency, providing cheap, lightweight comfort. But chemically, it is essentially solid gasoline. When exposed to an open flame, polyurethane does not just catch fire, it instantly liquefies, pooling into highly flammable synthetic oil that rapidly feeds the flames. As it burns, this modern material unleashes a staggering amount of heat energy, driving the room toward flashover at an unprecedented speed. Worse, the combustion of these synthetic polymers produces a lethal cocktail of gases, primarily carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide. Long before the flames reach a sleeping resident, 3 breaths of this toxic, superheated smoke are enough to cause unconsciousness. We have essentially furnished our homes with highly engineered fuel loads, drastically lowering the ignition threshold of our daily environments. It is not just the furniture that accelerates modern destruction, it is the very bones of the house. For centuries, homes were framed using solid, thick cuts of wood. Today, the modern housing industry relies heavily on lightweight engineered lumber. If you peel back the drywall of a recently built home, you will find oriented strand board, OSB, and engineered I-joists. OSB is manufactured by taking thin flakes of wood, mixing them with synthetic resins and adhesives, and pressing them into sheets. Engineered I-joists, used to support floors, consist of a thin web of OSB sandwiched between 2 small pieces of dimensional lumber. They are brilliant feats of structural engineering, allowing builders to span wide distances using a fraction of the wood required by traditional joists. However, in a fire, these materials are catastrophic. The synthetic glues holding the wood chips together degrade rapidly under extreme heat. Before the wood itself can even catch fire, the adhesive fails. The structural integrity of the material vaporizes. While a solid wood joist from 1950 might burn for 45 minutes before giving way, a modern engineered I-joist can fail entirely in under 6 minutes. Firefighters have coined a grim term for modern residential floors: the trap door. Crews entering a burning modern home routinely fall through the floor into the basement because the engineered joists beneath them have quietly disintegrated under the heat, offering zero warning before a total structural collapse.
This brings us to the first forgotten medieval secret.
If you look at a traditional Tudor-style home or a medieval timber-framed structure, the skeleton of the building is made of massive, heavy timber, often thick beams of green oak joined together without a single metal nail, using mortise and tenon joints. Common sense suggests that a house made of giant wooden logs would be the ultimate fire hazard. The opposite is true, due to a predictable chemical process called pyrolysis. When a massive beam of solid wood is exposed to extreme heat, the outer layer burns. But as it burns, it turns into a thick layer of carbon char. Carbon is a phenomenal thermal insulator.
Once the outer inch of a heavy timber beam chars, that blackened layer acts as a fireproof shield, drastically slowing the rate at which the interior wood burns. The unburned core of the timber remains cool and structurally sound. During catastrophic fires, temperatures often exceed the melting point of steel. A modern steel I-beam will heat up, lose its load-bearing capacity, warp, and collapse entirely at 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. A solid 12-inch oak beam in the exact same fire will char on the outside but continue to support the weight of the house for hours. Medieval builders did not know the molecular physics of pyrolysis, but they knew from brutal experience that massive timber survived infernos that warped iron and shattered stone. If heavy timber framing is so inherently fire-resistant, why did we stop using it? The death of this ancient method was not accidental. It was systematically regulated out of existence. The shift began in Chicago in the 1830s with the invention of balloon framing. As the American West expanded, builders needed a way to construct homes quickly, without the highly skilled labor required to carve complex mortise and tenon joints into heavy timber. They turned to cheap, mass-produced dimensional lumber, the 2x4, held together by cheap, mass-produced iron nails. It was revolutionary for speed and cost, but it created walls that were essentially vertical wind tunnels, allowing fire to shoot straight from the basement to the attic. Over the next century, as populations exploded and the demand for cheap housing skyrocketed, modern building codes were established to standardize construction. Bureaucratic bodies created the International Residential Code, IRC, to ensure basic safety, but these codes were written entirely around the new paradigm of standardized, lightweight dimensional lumber and synthetic materials. To build a medieval-style heavy timber home today, using traditional, non-standardized joinery and organic infill, is practically illegal in almost any modern suburb. Zoning boards and building inspectors do not recognize the structural validity of traditional mortise and tenon framing without prohibitively expensive custom engineering stamps. The codes mandate specific, factory-tested materials. By demanding standardization, the legal framework of modern construction effectively banned the ancient, hyper-resilient methods of our ancestors, forcing builders into a paradigm of lightweight, fast-burning vulnerability. The second half of this forgotten medieval secret lies in the walls themselves. Today, the interior of a home is exclusively covered in drywall, gypsum dust compressed between two sheets of thick paper. The gypsum itself resists heat, but the paper facing serves as immediate kindling for a developing fire, allowing flames to travel rapidly across the surface of a room. Medieval and early modern builders used a vastly superior, entirely fireproof method: wattle and daub, heavily coated in authentic lime plaster. The chemistry of traditional lime plaster is miraculous. It is made by taking raw limestone, superheating it in a kiln to burn off the carbon dioxide,
and then slaking it with water to create a paste. This paste was mixed with sand and animal hair to bind it, then spread over the wooden laths of the walls. Here is the secret. As lime plaster cures on a wall, it pulls carbon dioxide out of the surrounding air. Over a period of years, a chemical reaction occurs where the plaster literally turns back into solid limestone. People living in traditional medieval homes were effectively living inside a continuous vault of solid rock. Limestone cannot burn. It is highly alkaline, naturally mold-resistant, and entirely impervious to fire. If a localized fire started in a 16th century home, the flames would hit the lime-plastered walls and stop dead. There was no paper facing to ignite, no synthetic glue to melt. Yet, like heavy timber, authentic lime plaster was banished by modern efficiency. Curing lime plaster takes weeks. It requires skilled artisans, patience, and massive amounts of physical labor. Modern drywall can be slapped up, taped, and painted by a small crew in 48 hours. The modern construction industry, fueled by tight margins and demanding schedules, abandoned the limestone shield. Building codes adapted to the new reality, accepting the fire risks of paper-backed drywall in exchange for economic efficiency, leaving the ancient, fireproof walls of the past behind. The final nail in the coffin of modern residential fire safety is architectural design. If you look at the floor plan of a home built in the 18th or 19th century, you will notice it is highly compartmentalized. Homes were collections of small, distinct rooms, separated by solid wood doors and sturdy walls. This design was originally intended to conserve heat, allowing families to warm only the rooms they were actively using. But in a fire, this compartmentalization acts as a life-saving mechanism. Fire requires oxygen to survive. When a fire starts in a closed, small room, it quickly consumes the available oxygen. Without a fresh air supply, the fire chokes itself out, or at the very least, its growth is severely stunted, giving occupants ample time to escape. Modern architectural tastes have entirely reversed this dynamic. Over the last 40 years, the open concept floor plan has dominated residential design. Walls have been torn down to create vast, continuous spaces combining the kitchen, dining room, and living room into one giant cavern. While aesthetically pleasing, an open floor plan is a thermodynamic nightmare. When a fire sparks in an open-concept modern home, it has access to a massive, uninterrupted volume of oxygen. There are no walls to slow the spread of heat, and no doors to choke off the air supply. The fire breathes deeply, expanding without restriction. Once the heat shatters a large modern window, fresh oxygen rushes in, turning the open living space into a literal blast furnace. By removing the walls, we removed our home's natural defenses, creating high-speed oxygen highways that ensure a localized fire quickly becomes a total structural catastrophe. We view the evolution of home building as a straight line of unbroken progress, assuming that newer is always superior. But the reality of modern construction is a story of trade-offs. We traded the deep, heavy resilience of oak and limestone for the rapid, lightweight convenience of engineered wood and drywall. We traded the natural, slow-burning interiors of the past for the cheap, highly flammable synthetic comforts of the present. We traded compartmentalized safety for expansive, open aesthetics. The 3-minute window of survival in a modern home is not an accident of nature. It is a direct consequence of our economic and architectural priorities. The unburnable secrets of the medieval world, pyrolysis, the chemistry of the lime cycle, and the physics of heavy timber, were not lost because they stopped working. They were banned and regulated away because they did not fit into a modern supply chain that demands a house be built in 3 months flat. Understanding this history does not mean we must all move back into mud and timber huts, but it strips away the illusion of modern invulnerability. It reminds us that true safety is not just a smoke detector on the ceiling, it is rooted in the very materials that surround us. If you found this deep dive into the hidden history of our homes fascinating, do not let the learning stop here. Subscribe to the channel right now for more explorations into the forgotten engineering, lost historical secrets, and the invisible forces that shape our modern world. Drop a comment below on what ancient technology we should uncover next, and I'll see you in the next one.